Atomfall is going to be one of the more divisive games of the year. I think reviews are going to be all over the place. It's really going to come down to what you value in a game, I think. It's got its flaws, sure, but I think it could end up being a cult classic. So let's dive into Rebellion's first big attempt at a first-person game. You saw a lot of people dubbing this the British Fallout, and I think if you're expecting that, you're going to be a bit disappointed. I think it lines more in with the Metro style of game. Yet for me, whilst I was playing it, I definitely got some Fallout vibes. So if you're looking for that, I don't think you're going to be entirely disappointed with it. So we're going to begin with combat, stealth, and how enemy AI interacts. I know I just said it's not really much like Fallout in a lot of ways, but the gunplay to me feels like Fallout 4, which isn't necessarily a diss. It feels a bit aged, but I feel like in a weird way it scratches this nostalgia itch for me. So I was pretty happy with it. Furthermore, the melee combat I feel like is definitely leagues above a game like Fallout 4. There's certainly a decent amount of weapon variety: rifles, shotguns, SMGs, bows, knives, wooden boards, and a few weapons I won't mention due to spoilers. Yet if I had a complaint about the weapon variety, it's very surface level, and what I just mentioned is really about it. Within those categories of pistols, shotguns, and such, there's really only like one or two of each of those, if that. I do like how they had a category of rusty versus stock, which of course those two different categories come down to the effectiveness of the weapons and how much they end up selling when you're bartering, which we'll get into that. It's very perplexing that the enemy AI is both really smart and really dumb. On the one hand, they do a really good job of noticing you when you're stealthing. I think they have a good range as far as that goes. And also, if you use a gun, what really impressed me is the fact that the distance they hear the gun, I feel like is a lot better than a lot of games nowadays. I think when it comes down to
modern gaming,
a lot of the times I'll notice that I'm in one room, shoot, and then the next room, they didn't hear me, which makes no sense. That isn't a problem here. It leaves me very, very happy. It smells awful in here, and they are definitely farting. I don't know who the culprit is, but I'm probably gonna say it's the one on the left. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Back to the enemy AI, if you're in a gunfight, they'll weirdly just not use cover a lot of the time. Yet if you're in melee combat with them, they're very smart and they'll dodge. Finally, with the enemy AI, this is outside of combat, but it's worth mentioning. When they're all grouped together walking, their pathing is really weird, and it becomes very obvious they're trying to walk in a single file line, and they'll get jumbled and wait on each other to move. Luckily, this occurrence isn't too often, and when it comes down to groups of, say, 3, they're more spread apart and it looks a lot more, dare I say, natural. The really interesting thing is when you're out in the world and you run into these groups of the primarily 3 different factions, you pretty much have the military police, these like pagan fanatics, and then what are just termed as outlaws. Anytime you're out in one of the zones, which again, this is not an open world, more sectioned off, similar to a Metro Exodus. If you get too close, they'll just be like, hey, back off. They won't instantly fight you. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember the DARE program, the anti-drug program that really kind of failed. But I was looking for a meme of it where the big thing was for stranger danger was to tell them to back off, or anytime if you were being bullied, but I couldn't find it. So here's me doing it right now. Back off. However, much like in stealth, you'll have an indicator of being seen, though unlike stealth, it's much slower. If that bar gets too high, then they will attack you because you're, too close with a weapon. Overall, I enjoyed the combat and the stealth in the enemy AI despite its flaws. But what's really interesting to me is the difficulty settings, which sounds really weird, but hear me out. If you leave the difficulty settings on normal or higher, it's definitely the intended stealth experience. That's pretty difficult given the survival mechanics, which we're gonna get into next, don't worry. But if you turn down that difficulty 1 or 2 notches, it ends up being this more Fallout kind of experience. Humans will be one tap with headshots, but to the body it takes 2 or 3. But then once you get to the infected enemies, they definitely, it's still not an easy game, surprisingly. They take quite a few hits. So because of these difficulty settings, the devs intentionally or unintentionally created this build your own adventure type thing. Do you want the more action paced thing, or do you want the more overly stealth option? And I think that's a big plus.
Secret, 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 secret tunnel, yeah!
So the crafting of the game is a bit simplistic. You get your normal bandages, Molotov cocktails, makeshift grenades, and different drinks you can make that give you different types of buffs. There's a limited amount of materials you can find out in the world, such as scrap metal, glue, cloth. I am the toilet paper bandits and other various things you can find. Yet in a weird way, this kind of gets disappointing because with you adventuring so much looking for this stuff, I wish there was junk for you to be able to barter with, especially because the military police make such a big deal about having their armor and everything salvaged from wrecked things that have metal. I just think this would have made bartering a bit more interesting if you had various oddities to sell, and also would establish a bit more world building, even if it's just a sprinkling of it. I do really like the bartering system in the game. You've got your inventory and the merchant's inventory, right? In between it, you've got a scale. Of course, if the scale leans too much to the left, that means the merchant needs more, baby. But you can also definitely give them too much for no reason. So you want that happy medium right when it hits green, so you get your most value. There is no currency in this game whatsoever, which I like a lot because of the events of the game and how small the area is. A currency really wouldn't make a lot more sense, so a bartering system I think was a really good choice. I don't ever think there is a way to increase your inventory space, and it's decently limited, but I do really like the storage system. You can store up to, I think, 100 items, and it uses this old school chute, and it looks cool, and I like it. The skill tree is a little bit basic, but I do like how a good bit of it you have to unlock by finding or buying different magazines throughout the world.
Saw some rabbit droppings earlier, so we haven't eaten them all. We should let them get their numbers back up. Wouldn't take long.
I don't know what it was, but I definitely thought my man was talking about eating rabbit shit for a second. As far as the infected go in the game, we've already briefly talked about the different factions, and they all feel kind of samey in combat. Both the military and the outlaws use guns and various melee weapons, while the druids typically will use bow and arrow and similar themed melee weaponry. The infected serve as a decent change of pace. You've got animals and insects. Oh, hey, look, some birds flying weirdly close. Okay, no. That was weird.
What is it? Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast! Ah! Oh, my eyes!
It's Plague Tale Innocence all over again. The irony is, in that same mission, I lost my innocence. For the rest of the video, if you hear anything in the background, probably my kids, they just got home, so. Now, for the infected humans, I can't really show much besides if you see anything here, it'll be from the trailer. Otherwise, there's not gonna be nothing. Just because of restrictions I was given with my review guide. They're a bit limited, more than I would have liked as far as variety goes. I think that's one of my big complaints. Now, I didn't get to do a lot of the game. I did main story plus a few of the side missions. So there's a good chance there's some unique ones I missed, but I don't think I did. And before we get into some story stuff, the reason why I was only able to do so much is I got my hands on the game in a very small window of time. So I always have a rule where I want to finish a game before I review it. So I busted my butt to do just that. So let's get into the story, the world building, the lore, the voice acting. Easily the best part of the game, by far. The story consists of you waking up in a bunker with no memory of what's going on. You get out into the first zone and quickly realize, oh, something bad's happened. Much like you saw from the trailers, you realize this alternative history 1960s town has a nuclear plant that's exploded. And because of it, there's a quarantine. As you get through the opening portions of the game, you get to this facility where you realize, oh, to save the day, I have to find these atomic batteries in order to get said facility working. which I know it sounds like you're chasing a bunch of MacGuffins, but I can assure you, based on the lore you find explaining these things, they get really interesting and are worth that brief feeling of repetitiveness you'll get. Now, just because the reward can be the same a lot of the times, the quests you get sent on are all very much different and a lot of the times very, very interesting. And funny enough, you can even buy them from merchants. Of course, they are dreadfully expensive within this bartering system. While getting this is kind of the main goal, there are so many other side quests and even main quests where that's not even being touched. You got different factions you can side with. You help this one, and the other one's like, well, why do you hate us so much? The game does a really good job with all of this with no cutscenes. Everything is real time or in dialogue or in notes. And the notes are actually interesting to read. The lore here is really good. And sometimes you'll find notes that explain why you shouldn't side with this person or why you should. I think my only complaint with this is there are audio logs. I just wish there were more of them because the ones you do find are really cool. There are multiple endings. I'm not really sure as the game branches out how many of those endings there are and if some of them kind of, it seems to be some of them kind of come back together to where it seems at first there's a lot of different ones, but maybe there's not that many different ones. And honestly, the ending I got was kind of disappointing because it was very vague, but it was also very brief and just, like I said, vague to the point where it just felt kind of disappointing. Keep in mind, that's like the last 30 minutes of the game after the climax of what happens with you dealing with the nuclear plants. That part, very, very dope. It's just afterwards, as they attempt to close out the game, I feel like that's where you get this kind of gutted feeling of, oh, I wish there was a bit more complexity to it. Yeah, overall, very happy with the story, side missions, the lore you can find, going out of your way to discover various things. And I think it should be applauded that there is so much depth to it, considering how it's literally one town and the surrounding area all quarantined off, and then the nuclear plant itself. So there is a lot there, despite what feels like a smaller area, right? I know the devs said that it could take about 25 hours to beat the game, unless you're more of a completionist. I personally spent about 15 hours with like I said, not doing as much of the side stuff as I could have. And also on that easier difficulty, of course, I got through different buildings, fighting enemies a lot faster than had I gone with the other playstyle of sorts. I say playstyle, but more difficulty. But I really do think, and I want to say it again, I feel like upping the difficulty or turning it down does affect the playstyle of the game, and I think it makes it kind of unique in that way. The voice acting in the game is really, really good. I don't know if they used multiple voice actors for multiple roles or if it's a completely unique cast. I can't think of an instance where I had a weak voice acting performance heard at all by me. Now, I played on the Xbox Series X. I didn't have a single crash. Graphically, the game looks pretty solid. There's better, there's worse I've seen here lately in gaming. Performance-wise, I didn't notice any staggering drops in frames and just no noticeable bugs. Oh, and before we get to the conclusion of the video, I wanted to say about the music. There's a weird lack to it. With the 1960s setting, I wish there had been more. You can find radios playing what I thought at best was like 2 to 3 songs. And this could have been a licensing thing. I don't know. But even the OST is very lacking. A lot of just minor ambiance. Here and there, a couple of banger, OST stuff, but even then, very limited. That might be one of my biggest disappointments of the game, honestly. Which is why the music you're hearing here is just that ambiance. And also the devs couldn't get me actual music files in time. And forgive me for ranting about it, but I suppose at the same time, if you don't want to feel overly similar to Fallout, which again, people been making comparisons of since the game was announced, I get maybe wanting to stay away from licensed music, but at the same time, that would have easily added to the immersion. So I wish it would have been a thing.
So hot.
So overall, I really enjoyed the game, despite flaws it has. I think this is a really good first attempt with Rebellion. going from their sniper series to this first person aspect. And I do think reviews are going to be all over the place. But for me, I feel confident in saying a 7 out of 10. And I think it's beautiful it's on Game Pass. This is 1,000% going to be a game where I know people that watch my streams, which I stream on Twitch, by the way, twitch.tv/BargainBigGaming. I know if they play it, they're going to come back to me and be like, I loved it. I hated it. I thought it was okay. There's gonna be such a mixed bag. I do think that. So please go watch other reviews. Try it on Game Pass. If you do play it, feel free to come back to this video and let me know what you think about it. Or go follow me on Twitch. Let me know live what you think about it. And 2 last things. 1, make sure to I'm keeping that in. Make sure to subscribe. I feel so much shame right now. If you don't want to now, that's okay. Make sure to please like and comment. That is very important for any YouTube video. And also go check out my other Atomfall video I made. The dev sent me this big care package, including a life-sized weapon from the game and a bunch of other cool stuff. But on that note, the video's done. Get out of here, and I'll catch you on the flippy floppy.